Oh yeah, it's that time of the week. Gridiron 360, I am Bill. Dave is sitting across from me. What's up?
Hello, hello.
We want to thank you for joining us as we are going to dive into fantasy football week 2. Week 3? Week 2? Week 3? We're reviewing week 2 and going into week 3. We're at a crossroads, as you may be at a crossroads with your fantasy quarterbacks. Man, did we have an absolute throttling of starting quarterbacks out of the lineups for a good amount of time this week. We will touch on that. We will go through our position groups. We'll start by talking about how things went for us personally last week. Dave, I can tell you, and I know I've been talking about getting out here about a podcast about daily fantasy. We've just been so busy with what we've been doing that I haven't really gotten a chance, but I do play daily fantasy. I am a FanDuel guy. I also like Draft, not DraftKings, not so much a DraftKings guy. I like Draft because it's totally different than the other sites, so check it out. And then FanDuel is your classic daily fantasy league where you have a salary cap. And I got to be honest with you, my friend Dave, that was close. I did a single game matchup wherein you pick 5 players from a team. One of them is your MVP slot. That's basically gets time and a half points. And I did it for the Monday night matchup between the Browns and the Jets. And I had Mr. Odell Beckham in the MVP slot. I had Nick Chubb. I had the kicker Seibert for Cleveland. I had why am I slipping his name? Le'Veon. Sorry. None that impressive, though he was a workhorse. I had Le'Veon, and I had money left over, and I was bouncing around. I went with Robbie Anderson, still leaving $500 on the table because you can do that sometimes. We were sitting there with about 2-3 minutes to play, and I am one of 12 sitting in first place. A nice little, I think it was like a $1-2 buy-in. And I was sitting there with the potential $330 win. And I started scrolling through the next group of players that outside of the top 12 that I was sitting in, and there sat an identical lineup, sans Le'Veon. In place of him was Baker Mayfield. And as we go into the last few minutes of the game, Baker's behind by like a full point. Have no idea why they're throwing the ball 23-3, 23-6, whatever it was. But he did. So he ends up scooting ahead. I think he ended up with 60 points. Le'Veon sitting with 50.9. So I get knocked down to a $12 win. Now, the Jets actually get the ball back, and I don't want them to hurt their superstar, but I'm just thinking, look, brother, give me one carry for just plus yardage instead of negative. Doesn't have to be super. And Ty Montgomery's in there. Wah, wah. And we love it still. I'm going to play more this weekend. I ended up in plus on the weekend. I ended up, coming up about $50. But it's fun stuff. I digress. We want to talk about season-long fantasy football here. I'll, after my little diatribe, throw it over. Dave, how'd you do, bro?
I did all right for myself. I am currently sitting in first place. Who's in second?
That would be moi.
Who's playing this week?
Oh, yeah! And for those of you that don't know, and we'll preface this in the preview for college football and NFL this week, Dave and I are taking a little vacay next week. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to hit the airways for you. Just might be an edited version of our usual cast, because we are taking our children and our families and a few others down to the most magical place in the world, Disney World. So we are going to get to go head-to-head as we travel down there Sunday.
Yep.
And as I look at our matchup, I've got somebody Thursday. I don't have anybody Monday. You do. You got one Monday, so you'll get to enjoy it in the car, and then maybe we'll be watching each other with you having Chicago's defense Monday. So
and Montgomery.
Oh yeah, you do have Montgomery. Yeah. Good. So how you feeling? Talk about what happened to you and what's coming here this week as you face the roast beasts.
Oh, brother. So, you know what? I can't complain. I got a couple of things that I gotta contemplate. But overall, again, I've told everybody this, and this is kind of where we'll go with this fantasy. The way to win is you've got to have consistency. I mean, you have to be able to throw in a couple of home runs here and there, and you got to find that diamond in the rough. But I will say this: if you're not dealing with major injury and you're starting to move your lineup to the point where people you didn't have on your draft in your draft are getting starts before the bye week, you're probably in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah,
probably not always, but probably in a little bit of trouble.
Week 4, I think, is when buys start.
I believe so.
So for those that play out there that are serious about it, you probably, when you drafted, it's why they show bye weeks. Took note of that. Hopefully you did. Not the end of the world if you didn't, but if you didn't, then I'm hoping that you're not just preparing for this week, but knowing bye weeks will start next week, you need to maybe fast forward your week 3 to week 4, see who you got in, who you got out, and moves you may need to make to supplant some guys on the bye.
Yeah, and that's not to say I haven't made any moves. I just haven't had to play them as of yet. I second-guessed my initial call on defense in week 1 and put the Bears on the bench against Green Bay in favor of Cleveland playing Tennessee. That didn't work out.
Yeah, I hate it when I do that.
Don't second guess yourself. I finished with the most points for the week. I have, and I'll start in what I hope will continue to be a season-long enjoyment of Pat Mahomes leading at the quarterback. So, as we talked about it in our recap, the guy for the first time ever gets in his career of starts gets nailed with no touchdowns in the first quarter. Pucker meter. Getting up there.
Oh, how did he do for week 1? He did all right, didn't he?
Yeah,
Did he crush it?
Yeah, he crushed it. So he threw 3 touchdowns in week 1, a ton of yards. In week 2, though, he decided, well, maybe I'm going to throw a little challenge at myself. So he didn't score in the first quarter, but then just went and threw 4 touchdown passes in the second quarter. I ended up with a big chunk of change from him. Keenan Allen continues to be the guy, even in a very lackluster game. Amari Cooper was making me a little nervous, but got a touchdown at the end. I had Kenny Golladay. As you can see, the Hawkinson experiment fizzled this week. Not to say that it can't come back.
Mm-hmm. I was in one of my leagues. I had dropped, I think, Vance McDonald for him. Vance McDonald proceeds to have 2 touchdowns this week. And so I attempted to go get Mark Andrews, and I'm playing this roulette. Didn't get him, so I'll stick with Hawkinson.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea, like I had in the running game, I had Dalvin Cook. If you haven't heard already, I am a big believer in David Montgomery. Had a rough week 1 where he only got, which I wasn't totally shocked with. The play calling was pretty bad, and Trubisky did not have a good game. He only had 7 touches, 6 on the ground for 18 yards and 1 target. This week, he had a little bit of a rebound against Denver, who's, again, a tough D, not quite where I wanted him to be.
So sorry, I interrupted. I fell over. Almost went through the screen. Sorry, continue.
All right, so David Montgomery had a nice rebound again. I take it with a grain of salt. Denver is not a terrible defense. Played a little under their abilities. While David Montgomery is yet to really light it up in the yardage, he had 18 carries for 62 yards and a touchdown, and then another reception for 6 yards. So he's starting to progress. I said by about week 4. I should know whether that was a good call or not. Probably my trouble spots are in 2 areas. I would say I got Evan Ingram at tight end, and that's really just what's going on with the Giants. In a way, he's kind of in a good spot because they're limited on targets. Now with Daniel Jones,
you're in a good place with Daniel Jones.
We might be in a much better shot there. And then my only other concern is James Conner for 2 reasons. One, he got dinged up, so he didn't have as big a game. Did not have a good week 1 either. And now with Roethlisberger, we got to see what that offense looks like. So all in all, I mean, I've got Marquise Brown sitting on my bench. I actually have Carlos Hyde, which was a pickup I made after week 1. Was kind of a fringe thing. I didn't really have a good fifth running back. He's not looking too bad at this point, at least as a throw-in, not somebody I'd start. I've got Matt Breida in the interim. I still want to see how this shakes out with San Francisco.
Right.
They spread the rock to everyone in the last game, so everybody won. And those are just guys on the bench. So overall, I was feeling good. I got some consistency, and even guys that had down weeks, like the Chargers having a down week with Allen, I still got that. I mean, Dalvin Cook was actually exceptional in the fact that they were down 21-0 very early in the game. And they still fed him the ball because Kirk Cousins sucks.
He does.
So now the only thing is, can they continue that? Because there's only going to be more and more pressure, and they're going to put more and more people in the box against Cook. So that's kind of how I played out this week, and got a big matchup against you coming up.
Yeah, this is good stuff. I agree.
How'd you do?
I did all right. I ended up only winning 1 out of my 3 leagues this weekend. One of the leagues was straight mismanagement by the team owner, myself. I would have won the game had I went with my gut, my friend. I had Will Fuller sitting on the bench. I had T.Y. Hilton in a receiver slot. And I was just thinking to myself, Texans are taking on the Jags. Jalen Ramsey's going to be strapped on Nuke. And this could be a great opportunity for some home runs from Will Fuller. I mean, understand, Will Fuller's, he's one of my bench guys. He's a guy that I drafted not to make more confusion to pick, who am I going to start at wide receiver, but a guy that I'll slot in based on certain matchup situations. Mm-hmm. His floor is low. His ceiling's really high.
Yep.
If he hits that game, he can be an out of the park. It'd be like week 1 with Deshaun Jackson, Marquise Brown, what have you. I did that, and he did nada. Meanwhile, T.Y. had a very solid day, and as a result, I lose by like 10 points, which is just about what I would have had with T.Y. There might have been somebody else, so just mismanaged. I do feel good about it. Today is Wednesday, so it's usually waiver wire day for most leagues, and I got to be honest, man. I've made this the league that I am discussing now is a 12-man ESPN league, and I've made very little moves, and I like to do it. Everybody likes to play the wire. They don't do anything stupid just to play the wire, mind you. But guys on your bench that you might want to play a little roulette and see if they might have look at some matchups upcoming that might be worthwhile to stash. I haven't needed to. I really have the guys that I think I need on my team. And, right now I'm just going to kind of leave it where it is. Now, in the other 2 leagues I play in are Yahoo leagues. The other one I lost, Devonta Freeman, you are killing me, sir. And I know a lot of you out there that have Devonta Freeman. Everybody hurts. I was basically down. We've gone over this league that we're in here in our Yahoo leagues is very high scoring. Backs on average should, a good day might be like 20 in the low 20s. Solid day, mid to high 20s. 30 and over is pretty good. Great day. I needed him to do less than just hold his own. I needed 18 points out of the guy. And, let me just flip over here and check what that shitbird did, because he ended up with, I think it was like 16 points for me. Let me see. Sorry. Hold, please. Yes. Week 2, Devonta Freeman has 14.9 points in the league that I needed 18 for a victory. I don't understand what's going on with this guy, and I'm looking on my bench, and I could have supplanted him because he was in a flex spot with Emmanuel Sanders, who had like almost a 30-point day, but it's a back versus a receiver. That's typically not something you're gonna think's gonna happen, especially when you only need 8, just a hair under a decent day, and he couldn't even do that. This is now 2 weeks in a row with him, and I don't know what to do. And I got to be honest, I made a trade. I threw him out there. I ended up not trading him. I have Josh Allen and Russell Wilson on my team, and I've kind of been riding Allen, even though Wilson did have a better day. I have, for my running backs, outside of Devontae Suckman, I have Mark Ingram and Derrick Henry, who have done fine. Not a great week for Ingram, but I'm not worried about it with that offense. Henry has been surprisingly good. And then I have Damian Williams and LaShawn McCoy, which is, I'm rolling dice there. So I made a move and picked up Joe Mixon from a guy who had him on the bench, who had Ben Roethlisberger, who obviously went down, and then had Baker Mayfield, and Baker's crapped himself 2 weeks in a row, and he needed quarterback help. So I made the trade. I don't mind it at all. It gives me a little more depth at running back. I'm fine with Josh Allen. To be honest with you, not a lot of quarterbacks out there in this league, but there is some guys that I could go to throw in there if there's a bye week, if I need a second quarterback just in case I'm getting concerned about Allen. I mean, I could find somebody, Daniel Jones. We could see what happens with my man there. So anyway, that didn't work out for me. Now going into our league, I did win. I won against one of our top opponents that usually comes out as always in the playoffs or championship game, wins a lot of years. He's like the one single guy of the group, so he has plenty of time on his hands.
Seems to hit that waiver wire 1 minute after it opens up.
Hi, Brent. You should be listening. We're watching, buddy. We're watching.
Yep.
So anyways, it was, they give these projections in all the leagues in our Yahoo, and it had him waxing me, and that didn't happen. I won by like 20 points, much to my chagrin, and I'm sorry if you folks like the ESPN fantasy folks, Matthew Berry and those clowns over there, and I'll watch them for their rankings and I take it with a grain of salt because I listen to a lot of fantasy casts. The guys on Sirius XM, my guy Jeff Manns during the day from 2 to 4 on Channel 210, Elite Sports, Fantasy Football Radio. Love him, but all the shows, way more knowledge. Matthew Berry, yeah. So I go into this week with Allen and Russ. And last minute, I'm listening to Matthew Berry, and I know who I'm facing. I'm facing Brent, who's a good player. He has Lamar Jackson, by the way. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking to myself, Josh Allen, Russ Wilson, good, but, Lamar Jackson, he had another bang-up day. Maybe I need to try to see if I can find someone with maybe a little extra upside, take the chance on a lower floor. And as I'm listening to these clowns Sunday morning, Matthew Berry starts to go into talking about Jared Goff and his home road splits and how he was like Roethlisberger and plays so well at home, and he expected him to just have a blow-up day in an NFC rematch against the Saints. If it weren't for the rest of my team, I would have lost this game because he did okay, but my other quarterbacks put up about 10 and 15 points more than this jerk did. And why I list him, I have no idea. I'm smarter than that. People, make your own decisions. Get as much information as you can and make an educated decision. And honestly, you kind of alluded to it earlier, trust your gut most of the time. Sometimes it's always good to evaluate, but oftentimes, you drafted a certain team for a reason, and I don't know why I did it, and I dumped McCole Hardman, which was stupid too, just to get Golf. You can best believe waivers opened up this morning, gone for a defense.
Yeah, I know, I saw.
Because I have Baltimore's defense as my drafted defense. Love them. They're great, but they're taking on the Chiefs this weekend in Kansas City. And the Dallas Cowboys, who've got a very solid defense, get the hapless Miami Dolphins, who each defense that's faced them thus far this year has gone batshit crazy. So, I'm just playing the matchup there. I will ride Baltimore's defense and probably dump Dallas after this week. It is only an 8-man league, so I want to free up that spot for a position. But all in all, did all right. In the other Yahoo league, I dumped O.J. Howard for T.J. Hawkinson. I dumped Vance McDonald for T.J. Hawkinson. Mentioned that. You said Hawkinson did have a good day. He didn't. And Vance McDonald has 2 touchdowns with Mason Rudolph. And I don't know if that's worth me going back to get him. I actually made a bid for Mark Andrews from Baltimore, the tight end, but Brent picked him up. I think he did. Maybe not. I think he did. But in our league, I actually dumped O.J. Howard for Darren Waller. He had a good day. All my backs had a good day. I have Ezekiel Elliott, Nick Chubb played well, more what I expected out of a keeper. Leonard Fournette, not great, but solid, decent. 20 points for me. That'll work. I'd rather do that than play the game with. I kind of misled myself. I think last week I talked about the Patriots game script and that I thought there was going to be more running and it was going to be a good day for Sony, and he had a solid day. He had 21 rushes in that game, many more carries than week 1 by far. 85 yards, 1 rush TD. He only ended up besting the score of Fournette by a couple 3 points, but I kind of should have trusted my advice. No matter, I won, and number 1 versus number 2 for the top spot, hopefully this weekend, unless somebody else blows it up with a score that'll jump ahead of us. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
We'll be talking smack as we wheel our way down to Orlando.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We might have to pull over and switch cars to ride together, and I'll slap you around. I played Antonio Brown this weekend. He had a good day. You had talked about it when we were talking about the NFL recap about, he was being eyed a lot by Brady, more than you usually see Brady eye a receiver.
There was if you watch this game, especially in the beginning, again, you'll only see that he had 4 catches, but the game got out of hand. And I don't want to say out of hand, but the game was clearly the Patriots were holding it. But there was a purpose to get him catching the ball in the first series. So, yeah, that, and it got him in the end zone, right? 4 catches.
It did. And, I guess that, he's the guy's. We've shared our feelings on him in terms of a fantasy football player. You got to put those feelings aside, man. I will play him again because of the, I have some other good. I have T.Y. Hilton. I have Devontae Adams on my bench. I have Cooper Kupp, who had a magnificent day this week, and he was sitting on my bench. 5 receptions for $120 and a 6-yard 6 rush yards, no TDs, because they called that one magnificent catch that he barreled his way 50-plus yards down the field in the end zone off. But I have Allen Robinson and I have A.J. Green on my bench. So I have some, again, we are an 8-person league. A lot of teams are stacked. But I have some great receivers. But I will play Antonio again for the mere fact that, 1, Brady's eyeballing him. 2, there are tons of weapons to worry about on their offense for opposing defenses, and give that guy a little bit of room and he can make things happen. And 3, and finally, folks, we, I know there's no conclusion to this whole sexual assault, rape case, this, that, and the other, and more things are coming out of the woodwork. The point is we don't know how much time. We hope that we can ride them out, but, use them while you can. Use them while you can. Outside of that, like I said, I made a little trade in my other league. Well, I think Mixon will be good. You touched on Connor. I think that he's going to be okay to go this weekend. I don't know if Jalen Sam. Again, 8-man league. We're all stacked, so I understand the handcuffing. But sometimes there's just too many good, players out there to use a spot just for a handcuff of a guy that may never see the field or enough work. That being said, if you have the spot and Jalen Samuels is out there and you're worried, that's the guy, obviously, that's going to spell Connor. I'll tell you this. Big Ben's had a great career. And not that I don't think he can't still do it. We talked about Rivers, we talked about Ben, and we talked about Eli Manning coming in the same draft class. Talk about Brady all day long. He's a freak. It's why he's the GOAT. Okay, but for the majority of quarterbacks, a la Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, and these three, they hit that peak and they're just done. I really, the feelings I have for Eli Manning as a Giants fan, I'm feeling for the Steelers fans because I'm seeing kind of the same outcome really in my mind with Roethlisberger, and I just think he's done. So I say that to say, and one of the shows I listen to is Fantasy Alarm in the afternoon. They actually said Mason Rudolph, the backup, was from, I think he said something silly like Virginia or something. Like, yeah, no, he's Oklahoma State.
Yep.
He hasn't been talked about much because Ben has had the helm. But I'll tell you this, that guy can throw the ball. He's tall. He put up tons of yards in college. I think this is going to help the Steelers. And I think this is going to help James Conner. I think this is going to help Juju. I think it certainly opens up a different level. Now, don't get twisted. I don't foresee this guy taking hits and being able to stay upright like Ben can, but you may see a little more pocket movement in terms of him. I'm not scrambling, but being able to move outside the pocket, move up in the pocket, a little more nimble on his feet maybe than Big Ben was, and I think that's going to help. It's all yet to be seen. We have a lot of this going on with the quarterbacks, so
yep.
I guess let's talk a little bit about that because that's the topic of the week. Drew Brees goes down. It was ugly. His hand hit Aaron Donald's helmet.
Hand.
Yeah, his hand.
No, hand to hand.
Oh, hand on a follow through on a pass. Tore,
Caught his thumb, yeah.
Tore ligaments in his thumb. They show him on the sideline trying to pick up a ball. He couldn't even do it. You could sense the frustration. In comes Teddy. Teddy Bridgewater is a guy that they picked up, was on the open market, in the offseason. I actually thought the Giants should have made a play with him considering he was right next door with the Jets. Bridgewater, I feel like, is a solid guy. I just feel like he kind of looked not ready, which surprises me. You got a guy in Brees who's awesome, but he is getting older, and it shouldn't matter. You see a guy like Mason Rudolph came in and actually did all right. They were chomping at the bit to have their chance. It was like, the understudy has been called to take over, and he just didn't look comfortable. They do have the Taysom Hill kid behind him. I don't know that you'll see, unless Bridgewater is just god-awful this next week or gets injured, that Taysom Hill's going to do any more than he does coming in the Wildcat, coming in, to line up at slot, things like that. I think that the Saints there's going to be way more of an impact with Brees going on the Saints than Roethlisberger gone for the Steelers. And who else do we lose? Well, we know Sam Darnold was gone. Trevor Siemian gets the start for the Jets, and first half gets busted up. He's gone for the season. In steps Luke Falk. Heard audio from the presser after the game. Falk's like, it's just been a crazy week. He's like, start of the week, I was sitting on the practice squad, practicing with those guys. Here we are a week later, Monday Night Football, and I'm starting quarterback for the New York Jets. So he's pretty much a whirlwind, but I didn't think much of Simeon. I think they're in a better position with Falk, to be honest with you. He found Robbie Anderson a couple times. Robbie hasn't done anything this year yet, and we've talked about his cornerback matchups that is going to continue, but he found them on decent balls. It wasn't like, they were bad balls. So I don't know. But again, I think there's going to be more impact from the loss of Drew Brees in New Orleans on, all the playmakers there, unless really, Teddy comes out and it's a 180 this week.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's definitely the biggest loss, and probably where I get it is They're a pass to set up the run, and they certainly are more of an offensive team than a defensive team. The Steelers can still rely on good defense. They do have a decent running back. And so the idea, actually, they have two decent running backs. I actually like Samuels in the backfield for them, as spelling him out. And also you've got Rudolph, I guess they both are equivalently in the system for 2 years. So I agree with you. I think there's more support for the Steelers around him than there is for Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, Drew Brees is the engine of that team all the way around. And it's not to say that the Saints don't have a decent defense. It's just that I just don't see them in there with their matchups they got upcoming where they could just rely on playing defensive football to stay close. Now here, I will say this. If Brees is out for, I think it's 6 weeks? Is that what he's out for?
Well, we talked a bit about this in the NFL Week 2 recap. They're saying 6 to 8 weeks, and it's ligaments in the thumb. But it's like I said to you. I mean, I'm about to be 44 years old. You're 42 years old? Brees is 42 or something. I mean, what is he's got to be right around our age, over 40. Folks, if you're our age, then and if you're younger, you'll find out. We just don't, I don't care what you say or do. The human body, with age, you don't recover like you used to. So I think even 8 weeks is being modest. I think you'd be pushing him to get back in there with a chance of it being re-aggravated or him just not playing up to par.
Yeah, a big problem with him is going to be gripping the ball. But let me say this, regardless of that, because one thing is I will not count out Drew Brees. He was counted out more than a decade ago, and I think he's gotten the last laugh. But I will say this, if they are in play, because remember when we're talking about the teams that are out there, and I guess this is really more of an NFL comment, but it does have bearing on as we get further in the season, and if you were a Drew Brees owner, if he comes back and they're in striking distance –
they'll be.
I'll be honest. They'll be in the playoffs, and you're not going to want to play them. I'll tell you that right now. That you're not going to want to play them because they'll be that team that's got that. They'll be a wild card. The good part you would probably have out of them is you'll get them on the road. Which, if you know New Orleans, it's much better to catch them on the road than it is at home, especially if you're a team like Chicago or like a Green Bay, somebody outdoors. So. Again, we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. I agree with you that it hurt. I think really what probably is the most interest of those that are still out there, being able to play, is two things. Lamar Jackson, I was a little bit wait and see. I loved what he did. I thought it was great. I think the fact that they did it in game one the way they did, which was with his arm, he was very efficient. I think he was like 27 to 30, so he was unbelievable.
And how did he do this week?
He did very well. He was not as efficient, but he
almost threw for 300 still.
He did, yeah. But no, not a but. But
yes, no, he almost threw for 300 still, which wasn't as great.
But he did put 100 plus on the ground running the ball. So
that's what we know of him, and you're right. I love how they mixed it up.
Yeah, I want to see him where I'm really going to judge Lamar Jackson, just his progress. And again, this is not to say this guy's not a star. I think this guy's a top 8 fantasy quarterback, and it's. I don't. If you're questioning that, I got to know who your other guy is, because if it ain't Mahomes,
listen, man. I talked about it at the beginning of the year. This is a guy, like I said with Josh Allen, the two guys I was looking at late in the draft after if I didn't go quarterback early, if I didn't get Mahomes, which I didn't, then I was going to wait till closer towards a 10 round, 8, 9, 10 round to get a quarterback. And then I'd pick one up late. And I was eyeing Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, and I went with Allen. Jackson didn't get picked up, not in our draft. He got picked up after last week. But I told you, man, saw this kid in person in college. When they came, they were very highly ranked. He was his Heisman year. They came marching into Death Valley and took on Deshaun Watson and Clemson. And seeing that guy live against a really good defense that we had, I was like, this kid is different level.
He is.
The point is year 2, we talked about Georgia Tech's former head coach, running-minded head coach, coming as an advisor to Baltimore. I talked about year 2. He's going to get more comfortable, and it's really showing, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think my always question with him is not his athleticism. It's going to be number one, can he continue to be accurate? I want everybody to think about it. He's a start guy, but before you start thinking that he's going to be a 50-point-a-week kind of guy, just understand that there's 2 issues with him. Is one, when he faces a good defense, because he did start off against 2. I mean, Miami is a dumpster fire. We all know, and obviously, and Arizona is not great. Is not a world beater. But we're not talking about a good performance. We're talking about a all-pro type performance out of him both games. So I want to wait and see as to where he falls in that 1 through 8. I think there's more to be said. I think he's a little more likely to have a stinker game mixed in there, which could hurt you in a week. But I think all in all, you're going to win out with him at your quarterback.
I think his floor is high enough that you could ride him throughout the rest of the year, and his upside is so great that it's worth it.
Yeah.
And I agree with you when he faces a better defense, and it's not going to come this week. Kansas City's defense is still got to show me a little something more. However,
the pressure's going to be on him, though.
This could be a different scenario where you say you want to see him face a defense. I want to see him face he's going to have to, it's going to become a shootout.
Yep.
Or make a play with his legs, or make the right decision, audible at the line, know when to give it to Mark Ingram, and I know the coaches will be helping him along the way. But this is going to be I think it's going to be a bit of a chess match. I think, obviously, Baltimore wins in this game in terms of defensively. Way better defense than Kansas City. But we've seen what Kansas City can do to anybody. They'll shred you no matter what, which is why I have Baltimore's defense in all my fantasy leagues. But I have, particularly in our league, gone out and picked up Dallas because they're playing Miami. And just for the mere fact that there could be, it's Mahomes. So
all this being
points.
said, though, you watch, it's going to be 6-3 at halftime.
I know, and I'm going to see, folks, go with your gut. No, I'm not questioning the move for Dallas's defense. It's not based on projected points by the site. It's they're going against a high-powered offense. More times than not, they're going to score points. So that's kind of why I made that move. And Miami seems to be lost, and everybody's crushing them. So I'm hoping that'll work out in my favor.
Yep.
But it will be a good test for him this weekend. I think it's a different type of test from what you're saying in terms of facing a good defense. It's the game script is just going to be, who's not going to make a mistake, who's going to turn the ball over more times. Are you going to be able to match them score for score? Are you going to be able to match touchdown to touchdown, rather touchdown? I mean, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, right now you're looking at your top 5 quarterbacks. I kind of looked around some different places. You're pretty much looking at Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, Tom Brady, and Deshaun Watson, given their matchups and skill sets. Of that list, I'm probably the least high on Dak Prescott, and simply because I think, one, this is a great game to get Zeke really going. It's also against a bad Miami team. I also think that Dallas could score just like New England did, a couple of defensive touchdowns, which does not bode well for me against you. But
because they'll just hit the ground.
Yeah, I almost don't like it when you're playing the absolute doormat and you're a quarterback. I agree with you on Lamar Jackson and Pat Mahomes are both. The expectation would probably be that scoring is going to have to happen. I don't think it's going to be like a 45-43 game. Baltimore's defense is just too good. But I am
trying to see, which we'll talk about, in the preview, with the line on this game. I got to imagine it's going to be the largest line this season yet. Maybe like a 56 or maybe even pushing like 60, like a 59.
I don't know, though. I think there's going to be some respect for that Baltimore defense.
I hope
able
so.
To create some confusion. And then you got Tom Brady playing the Jets. Well, like I said, I won't be fooled again. I'm sure one time along the way, Tom Brady's going to have some hiccups. I don't necessarily think it's going to be against the Jets, and I don't think he tends to do number on his divisional opponents.
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson, I think, will have somewhat of a rebound game against the Chargers team. I am not a big fan of coast-to-coast kind of things, though he is in Houston, so I guess he's in the Central Time Zone. Playing out in L.A., they're probably going to I think that's going to be a high-scoring game, actually. So that could end up being good.
I'm just worried because I think the best, everyone talks about the Rams having a good defense. I think they're solid. It's not somebody that I'm happy with Baltimore way more than something like the Rams, even though they were ADP preseason ranked higher. But what is great about the Rams, as we all know, is the studs up front. And the issues that they've had with the line on Houston's side of the ball, and we know that Watson takes a lot of hits and is under duress a lot. That's my concern, is that their offensive line is going to get overwhelmed, and you just want to see the kids stay healthy.
Yeah, I think talking about health, one that's going to be kind of interesting to watch from a fantasy perspective to me is Philadelphia and Detroit. Philadelphia just not looking right. Carson Wentz still getting hit a lot. Got beat by the Atlanta Falcons.
And he took that. I mean, if you watch it, he took that a hit to the ribs, came out a little for a few plays before the end of the first half. I haven't seen anything on it because he played the rest of the game, and but don't think that he's complete 100% healthy. He got jacked, so he might be able to play through it. And he wears the rib guards and stuff, but and they need him, quite frankly, is probably why you don't see much out there on the wire about injuries with him. I mean, they need him. They lost everybody.
Yeah, probably an interesting matchup could be Stafford, too, against Philadelphia. I mean, Philadelphia's Achilles heel is their secondary.
Yeah.
And, while they have tried desperately, and I don't think it's working, to change their MO and to become more of a running team, this is a week where you try to get Stafford back to Stafford of old and let him go over the top. Could spell good things for them from a passing perspective if they, take that approach. You got Rodgers going and playing Denver. Again, they held the Bears in check, but Rodgers is not Trubisky, so it'll be interesting to see that chess match and can they get to him in that game. One game I think that it could be, and it's your guy, is Josh Allen. I mean, against Cincinnati, especially with him running the ball.
Yeah,
I think he could have a good show too as well. So
yeah,
some interesting matchups. Again, this is the great part. We said this early on in the year, is I think at the quarterback position, you're generally. Now we're starting to see a top 3 or 4. We felt initially Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson were the week in, week out, number 1 and 2. We were consensus on that.
Right.
But that feeling of going down, I mean, you can really start to get down into, now with some of the injuries, maybe to 15, 16, and still have some really good plays. So some guys worth looking at.
Just to chime in on the Philadelphia thing, and we talked again in our recap. They lost that game to the Falcons. They lost everybody in that game, and it doesn't look. It looks like Deshaun Jackson has something going on with an abdominal that's going to keep him out for a few weeks. Alshon Jeffrey was banged up. I think he's questionable. Dallas Goedert had a calf. The problem is when do they play? Thursday night. They play. All I know is they have a short turnaround because they played Monday night, and they will play. Let's see.
Titans and Jags are Thursday.
Oh, the Titans. So they'll play, but they play one. They have to go to Detroit. So they left.
No, it's in Philadelphia.
Oh, it is? Okay. All right. Well, that's good. The point is this: is they have a short time, so I expect a lot of their starters that got banged up, even an Alshon that might not be as severe as the couple weeks or so for the abdominal with Deshaun. It's such a short turnaround that they may need to rest him. And that said, keep your eye out. A couple guys, if you're in deeper leagues, that you may want to run out on the wire and get are the receivers there. I had Miles Sanders on the bench, one of their backs, and it did look like he got some more work. He's the rookie they picked up out of, where did he play? Washington, right? Miles Sanders?
Penn State,
sorry. I should have known that. Sat behind Saquon. I digress. The receivers in Philadelphia, now that these guys are gone. Number one, not that you wouldn't, I would expect Zach Ertz to. I know he's had decent games these first couple weeks. I think being considered, what was he, the number 3 tight end? It was Kelsey, Kittle, and him, ADP in the draft.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe 2, 3, depending on how you looked at he and Kittle. I think he's going to be worth it, at least for a while moving forward. We said it before. He is Wentz's favorite target. You saw it Monday night when those guys started to go down. Who did he turn to? Ertz. Even when the backup guy came in, I think he, like, the one ball he threw went to Ertz.
Yep.
So I think he is going to be tough to handle if you're playing against him. But again, from a wide receiver perspective, only if you're in deep leagues. I don't know how long these other guys are going to be out. So, if you need them, it might only be this week or next that you're going to be able to potentially get some value out of them. But he pronounces it Arcega instead of Arcega. Arcega-Whiteside, where did he go? Stanford, I think.
Yeah,
I think Arcega-Whiteside was at Stanford. He saw some looks. He didn't catch much, but he did get looked at. And when he was in college, he was a pretty good receiver, man. He was one of the top in the country. What I didn't see that I kind of expected was a little more of a battle with the defensive back, because in college he would be able to battle all the time and get contested balls, even with a guy draped on him. And then the other guy is Max Hollins. He got a couple looks in that game. So I expect those two guys kind of take up the helm for Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey. You still have Nelson Aguilar. They thought he might have had a concussion. We went through protocol, was out for a few plays, then came back in. So I guess he's good to go. He's going to probably come in there as the deep threat for Deshaun Jackson, and you're going to get the crossing routes, intermediate routes from Hollins and Arcega-Whiteside. So if you need them, guys to look at. Again, I said it in the recap. The thing is I hate the Eagles, but the fact that they hung in there with the Falcons, who were really doing Falcon-like things offensively, and that can be dangerous. They hung with them.
Yep.
Without their guys. So got to watch out for that moving forward. So what else do we want to talk about?
Why don't we take a look at some of the running backs, since, move into there and talk about what we're seeing. We kind of already mentioned, or at least I did, on the Dallas side. The number one back, I think, coming into this week, to me, is Ezekiel Elliott. I think, it's an easy game to get him rolling. Look for him. I look for him not to see much after the third quarter, so it may even be that Pollard might even be a good play if you're in trouble later on in the game.
Yep, you need a flex. You need somebody. If it gets out of hand, I think they're gonna. That's the one concern I have. I think that Pollard will start to get a little run. Yeah. And what we've seen thus far in these games against Miami, well, that's not been hard to jump up big. So.
Yeah, you've got other running backs up there. Your top 5, I won't say really is consensus, but certainly a few of these guys are. You got Dalvin Cook against Oakland. I got to be honest with you. I think just 2 weeks in a row of Kirk Cousins, I look for Dalvin Cook to have a little bit tougher road this time. They are at home against Oakland, which is good. But I think teams are just going to start putting heat on Cousins and getting him to throw. So you may see some regression, but he's been outstanding. I still expect him to get his looks. I think this is a 20 carry a game back, probably ceiling. I don't think they're really ever going to go past that, especially with some of his injury history. What he's really been tearing up is his yards per carry. I look for his yards per carry to come down a little bit. I could see him being more in the 70 to 80 range with those 18 to 20 carries. I think he'll get some pass catching out of the backfield. So he'll have a solid day. Mm-hmm. One rebound game I look for, Christian McCaffrey against Arizona. You mentioned it many a time. This offense is no longer Cam Newton's. It's Christian McCaffrey. Yep. Arizona is just the team to try to get him back on track. I know they're going to want to try to throw some more balls to try to get Cam Newton some rhythm.
Well,
he's not going to throw the ball 50 times.
Cam may not play. They're saying his foot injury.
Is he still considered? Okay.
Then
that only adds to him playing even more. So
I think that, again, is similar to the situation with Roethlisberger. They'll bring in Kyle Allen. Where did Allen finish his career? Houston? I think he went to Texas A&M and then transferred to Houston. Yes.
Follow you on.
I'm pretty. You can bring me 90+% on that You know I know my college.
Yep.
But Kyle Allen, Houston, I mean, even at Texas A&M, those are throwing teams. Like, this could be good for everybody there.
Yep.
You know, a lot of people may have lost hope in Curtis Samuel, hoping that last year he was, I think, the lead receiver on the team, and coming into this year, maybe not yardage wise, but in terms of receptions, especially in PPR leagues, like, that's a guy that you could target. And he got drafted in a lot of leagues, and after week 1, a lot of people dumped him. Not that great. Last week, actually seemed to be more involved in the entire game plan, but in terms of his fantasy production, it was not great again.
Well, I mean, there was a lot of missed passes to him.
Of course there are.
That he was open.
No
wide
touch.
open.
No touch, Cam Newton.
Yes.
And so I say all that. I mean, like, Kyle Allen may open that thing up for him. DJ Moore may be more valuable. And certainly Christian McCaffrey, I think, gets right back to form. And Greg Olsen, love that guy, dude. But I can't ride with you anymore, man. Yeah, I just can't. It's hit or miss.
Yeah.
I mean, and out of a tight end, you really need to have the opportunity for him to score weekly, at least one. And, I just can't bank on that anymore. Again, partly because, he'll get those scores when they're in close, but nowadays that goes to McCaffrey. So running down some of the other running backs, I think Saquon, got back to form this week. I think he'll continue to do so under Daniel Jones. It will open us up a little bit.
I got to say, though, I think that's going to be interesting, and not that Saquon's not going to come out, but the interesting thing, I think, is, usually when you think, okay, I'm going to bring a rookie quarterback in, mid-season, which early season, I think a lot of people feel, I certainly do, that this is probably a little earlier than what we'd want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned in the NFL discussion that we had that I think this is more of a move about there's a lack of acceptance of not winning in New York than it is about the right time for Daniel Jones. But here's the part that I think will be interesting how to play out is you would think that you're gonna take your primary back who's awesome and you're gonna pound the rock in the game. You're gonna throw short, safe passes to get your quarterback in rhythm. I got to be honest with you. I think it's going to be the exact opposite. I'm not going to tell you Barkley's not going to get his.
He will.
But I think the whole reason to bring Jones in is so he can push the ball down the field.
Correct.
Even though they're limited in resources. I actually could kind of see Saquon Barkley getting off more in the air than on the ground.
He could, but I think overall it'll be good moving forward just because I'm telling you, and Jones will run the ball. He can move in the pocket. He's a big guy. He's smart. He throws a good ball. He's not like horribly inaccurate. He might not be, he might not be bullseye with it, but he's pretty good. He can throw a long ball with some power behind it. He can throw touch balls. He's good, and he will run the ball, and he's a big guy. He's not speedy, but he can take a hit and grab a couple extra yards if things break down. So I say all that to say, we talked about it every game or before the season, just defenses, all they need to do is just stop Barkley.
I know.
Now I think it might start. They might have. It's going. You said it with the pass. It's going to start to ease back on all the box stacking, and I think the receivers will benefit. I think this week in particular, we go to Tampa Bay, who is historically not great at all against the tight end. So your boy Evan Ingram, I'm worried about. I think he's going to have a magnificent day that a la week 1 for a tight end. That's good. But the offensive line has been all right. I'm excited to see Daniel Jones back there. I said when you asked when you'd like him in, I said maybe 4 or 5. Game 4 or 5. Ideally, I'd like to see, a game where Eli starts. He gets eased into the game and then maybe finishes it. And then the next week he's the starter. That didn't happen. So, my biggest worry is that it doesn't, obviously I don't want him to get hurt, but that it doesn't go well and that it with New York media and fans are harsh, man. This guy I do think can be a consistent quarterback for us. I just want to make sure we're easing him in. I don't want to rush to it. So We'll see. I think you're all right though with the Saquon Barkley.
Certainly.
Austin Eckler had a great first week. A lot of the people were saying out there, the fantasy football gods, saying that they didn't know if that was going to continue. I think he had another great week, and I think he will continue to do so. And again, the whole Melvin Gordon thing may be for naught. Le'Veon, decent day.
Gets New England.
He's the only guy on that team, and obviously going into the game with Darnold being out and Simeon being in there and Simeon going down, then Enunwa was out and this guy was out, and that guy going into the game, the coaching staff said, it's your team today. I mean, it showed it when he was like taking snaps a few times. I mean, it's your team. They said it after halftime. They came out of the locker room, and whoever it was, Susie Colbert or whatever, asked Adam Gase, the head coach of the Jets, what happens if Luke Falk goes down. He's like, then who's the next guy on line? He goes, 26. 26 is Le'Veon Bell. Okay, he's like, and he's already done enough for us. So obviously they went into it with that. Nick Chubb got back to form. We spoke on Derrick Henry.
Yeah, well, on the Nick Chubb thing though, that's one that I'm off of this week, and I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
And it's not Nick Chubb. I've said this a little bit, but I think this is one where it comes to fruition. I cannot understand the offensive game plan for Cleveland. You mentioned it. You're up 23-6, and you're throwing the ball. I just feel like this is a game that they can make mistakes and the Rams can make them pay for it. And if they do, it could end up taking them out of the game because they have to throw the ball. I don't see any reason why you cannot dedicate the run to this guy. He's got the ability in my mind.
He made some great plays,
but they just don't do it.
Well, and
so until I see them commit to something like that, I'm concerned about him because I think you get down on this team and you are going to start slinging it around because that's what they do even when they're up.
That's right. And here's the thing. The year began, and there's a few people, they picked up Carlos Hyde and then dumped him, and there's a few people, they, let go of Duke Johnson to Houston. There's a few people in the wings, but you went into the season, and certainly me, keeping him thinking, okay, this guy, 3 down back, he's their guy. Mm-hmm. And in comes this kid from the Alliance of American Football, D'Ernest Johnson, who is now the 3rd down back officially there after what I saw this week. So a bit concerning. If they were smart, they would give him the rock a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
In this game, they give him the rock.
And I can't figure it.
Yep. Kamara. I'm worried about that. I said it. That's the team that could. The players on that team might, from a fantasy perspective, not just in NFL, that they, your Michael Thomases, your Alvin Kamara. I'm not going to say they're not worthwhile, but the value that you drafted them at has taken a hit in my mind.
Yeah, I think this is one Seattle has got a good enough defense where if I'm going to take somebody out of the game for Teddy Bridgewater, that's the guy. As good as Michael Thomas is, I'm going to take Alvin Kamara out of the game as best I can. I think Seattle can do it. I think they can throw enough confusion at him. I got to tell you, we're going to find out. Really, I think Sean Payton's a very good coach, but we're going to find out how good as he maneuvers through this situation with Breeze. I will say it does matter that, he gets a full week of reps and snaps. That does matter.
Sure.
So, but I this is one where, I think you'll see Kamara will score, but he's a bell cow to most teams that drafted him, I would think, and so it's going to be interesting to see how that one plays out and how he does. Those are some running backs that I look for and want to see, what are they going to do? I think some of the other guys that are kind of fringe that could have tough days, Derrick Henry, I think still going to do well. I think he's still going to be
been very solid.
Yeah, with Jacksonville. I think he continues that trend.
What about, we saw last week, or week 1, Kerryon Johnson was highly talked about. Didn't do much in week 1. Had a better day in week 2. Not great, but from a fantasy perspective, put up good points. Yeah. Okay, at least in our league. Not great, but good. But here's the thing. They picked up C.J. Anderson in the offseason. They just let him go. So now it's, it puts even more weight on the Kerryon Johnson thing. And, I guess for those owners, you hope his role kind of increases. And I kind of think it would.
I don't know that this is the game, though.
No, I don't. And then how about Marlon Mack? He had unbelievable week in week 1, and less than stellar effort last week. Now, Tennessee has a better defense than what people, they just don't even think about it.
I could see Marlon Mack rebounding. I mean, not rebounding to 175, but rebounding and certainly having a more prominent role in the offense, getting, probably anywhere from 18 to 20 touches. And I could see him going over 100. I mean, the Falcons can be run on. I mean, if you commit to it, they can be run on.
Yeah.
So I could see him rebounding. It really depends on how fast. I think that game could go back and forth. So that allows the running game to stay in play for the whole game, which is also very important. Kind of a reason why I'm a little bit off of, I think Ezekiel Elliott's going to have a good game, but like Dalvin Cook, that could be a game where, you could see a guy take a regression, just kind of whether it's a focus. Ezekiel Elliott, like I said, I expect him to be out in the third quarter, but he could have already put up 140.
Right.
And at that point, so
let's talk about some other situations in the running back field. Aaron Jones, just non-existent in week 1, and then in week 2 has a blow-up day, was actually the second highest running back in our league behind Dalvin Cook in terms of fantasy points scored.
Yep.
Had a great day, but still you have that Jamal Williams situation there, and it, based on last year and how this thing has started, it's going to be a guessing game with him. Now, if you're, if
they're
he's
also
one
playing Denver too, so
Yeah.
I don't know that that's really the advantage. I expect them to throw the ball more against Denver.
Sure.
To beat them, I look for him to have I wouldn't start him kind of day.
unless you have to. I mean, like if you're in a 2 running back league in a flex, and he's your RB2 or he's your RB3/flex, then and there's not many other options, you might have to play him. But it concerns me. It's just not a game I like to play where I have to guess what week he's going to get the workload and what week he's not.
Not only, it's not just workload. You have to guess when they're going to commit to the run too, because they're also you're talking about Green Bay, who very much in a way with the running game is like New England with every player. Like, with the exception of, like, Tom Brady, it's your guess who's going to get off. Like, who's going to be the running back of the day. Like you said, Burkhead in week 1 getting a majority of the carries.
Sony got him in this week.
Right.
It's
a passing game. It's
unless you have to make that decision, it's better to try to just roll with your core.
Yep.
Let's move on to another backfield that I'm curious about, and that's in Seattle.
Okay.
Chris Carson was probably drafted as an RB2, pretty solid.
Yeah. And
that's a team that was had the most rushing last year, and we expect that to continue. They draft Rashad Penny last year. They had a mishmash. They had Mike Davis. They had all sorts of folks. But I think the idea was you have Chris Carson and then Rashad Penny. You'd bring him up. And as we moved into year 2 this year with Rashad Penny, there would be kind of a split workload. Didn't see it in week 1. However,
he did not have a good reputation in Seattle coming out of his first year.
The hope his first year was a dud.
Challenge for it, and he bombed.
No, and that's what actually put him
and
that actually pushed him to like the third back on the depth chart behind him, Mike Davis.
Right.
Okay, who Mike Davis, good dude, but not your fantasy superstar. But this week Carson has some fumbly problems, and Penny gets some looks and starts to do something with them. And actually, I think it was just about a split carry backfield. I think Carson had about 11 carries to Penny's 10 or 11. I mean, it was really there.
And Penny looked good.
And he looked good. So I guess my question is I mean, depending on how deep your league is, I know in our league, Penny might have been drafted, but would have been quickly dropped. He's still out there, I think, in a couple of my leagues. Is that a guy maybe to draft and give a look? I mean, what do you think? Do you think that? I don't think they're going to go away from Carson, but obviously, if he was given, an even amount of carries with him, and he was able to make something work. I just don't know if you're going to see it every week. I mean, what do you think? I guess if you're hurting.
Yeah, if you're hurting, I think he's definitely somebody you could look to as you start getting into bye weeks and stuff. And
Yeah, because they don't have a bye till like week 11.
Right, so you could stash him, but like he's to me to a guy he has got to find that gear and maintain it for 2 or 3 weeks. He'd be the kind of guy I'd want to see him on my bench for 3 weeks, putting up good numbers and having him convince me that he's worth the spot, as opposed to taking a flyer on him and hoping I catch him in the right week. I'll say who's a very similar person to that is in Buffalo, though I think he's even further ahead, is Singletary, who still is struggling to get the carry load, but when he does, he's getting yards.
Now he may be hurt.
See him do it.
He may be hurt for this week. And old man Frank Gore also toted the rock well. You know, I mean, that's a guy. If he's he's out on the wire, go get Frank Gore. Go get him right now. Same with Houston. I hate to say it, but the whole thing with and I didn't believe that this would happen because we had talked on a podcast. I mean, people were kicking Carlos Hyde from one team to another. I just thought he was not a great NFL back, but he has taken control of the Houston backfield from Duke Johnson and relegated Duke back to his third down duties like he was in Cleveland. Yeah, so I don't know what to do there just yet. So, yeah, let's see where else. The Rams backfield. Obviously, Gurley is not getting the workload. We had talked about it. They are definitely have a plan to save him and keep him healthy for a postseason run. That said, last week we saw Malcolm Brown steal some goal line looks. That didn't happen so much this week. You know, you're still going to play Gurley. It might not be great, but you know, his floor should be decent enough to keep you solid. Let's see. Where else am I running around? Denver backfield. I just don't know. I mean, you can get some explosive plays, especially in the short passing game from Phillip Lindsay, but there is a clear split carry between my man Rolls-Royce Freeman, who I do have on the bench in one of my leagues, and he's splitting carries fairly evenly with Phillip Lindsay right now. So I just, I don't know where to go there. The last backfield I guess I want to touch on today is the San Francisco backfield. Most likely Tevin Coleman was drafted, but Matt Breida, Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., more than likely were not. Now, Raheem Mostert was probably picked up today in most of your leagues. He was one of the top projected backs for week 3, available on the wire. I just don't know yet. I'd still lean towards Breida if I needed somebody and I was gonna take somebody in that backfield. But Mostert had a knockout day, this past week, and so. Yeah, it's a guessing game. You said it earlier. The ball was spread around a lot, and kudos to Jimmy Grapes. I thought he had a decent day. Maybe not superstar. I don't think he ever will be that of a Mahomes. But that team's 2-0 right now. One way or another, they're 2-0. I don't care who the competition they are. They're 2-0, and they have the potential to continue that trend as they move forward. I mean. This week, let's see, San Francisco has who this week?
San Francisco has Pittsburgh.
At home. Yeah, so I don't put it past San Francisco taking another one. So that kind of touches on all the backs. I think we threw out some that are on the wire. We'll mix the waiver wire stuff in today as it's long-winded as usual. But, yeah, I think that's it. I think, if you want to talk about a Tampa Bay backfield, yeah, stay away from it. 1 week it was Ronald Jones. Last week it was Peyton Barber. Peyton Barber is the lead back. The only reason you might have interest this week is because they're playing my G-men, who are not doing great on the defense, but they are stout between the tackles on defense, and that's where a lot of Barber's runs go. And so, I'm just not thrilled about that. I'm not even going to get into the Kansas City backfield. Let's move on. Wide receiver talk. I mean, like, that's just, I said it earlier. I have looked Sean McCoy and Damian Williams, and they're both on my bench, and I probably won't play both either.
The running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, the starting running back, is Pat Mahomes' arm.
That's right. That's right. That's all you need to know. So let's jump into wide receiver. From my team, like I said, Antonio Brown, decent day. I do have Hilton in all my leagues, so I didn't play him in the one that cost me and played Fuller instead. I did play him in my other two. Had good day. Devontae Adams had a better day. Still hasn't seen the end zone yet, which is surprising because this is a guy, when I drafted him, and a lot of people asked me, what are their thoughts on receiver? I said, this guy's had double-digit touchdowns ever since he's been in the league. I don't anticipate that to go anywhere else. He is the number one guy for Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is healthy. I'm not worried about it. Decent day. 106 yards and 7 receptions. He didn't see the end zone, but that'll come. And I'm not concerned about my man, Nuke Hopkins. He had Jalen Ramsey strapped to him last week. You're going to play him, okay? Don't trade him. Don't try to play a game where you're gonna try to sell, or ask for him, make a trade asking for Nuke, trying to buy low. I mean, don't be the stupid guy to accept something like that. Nuke will be fine.
If you're even considering that, let me just make you an offer for any of you. Why don't you go ahead and send me whatever your entry fees are, and I'll send you back 20% of it, and you'll make more money than what you're making if you're making that move.
Who else? I was a little skeptical. There was a lot of chatter about Chris Godwin in the preseason. He, in my mind, has emerged to be the better receiver on that team. Now, Evans had more points, I believe, this week, fantasy-wise. Maybe not.
No, because I think didn't Godwin?
Yeah, Godwin saw the end zone. Yeah, so Godwin, I like him, man. I was a little skeptical, but I think he's definitely playing a role in that offense. One guy that, again, I could have put him in there instead of Will Fuller in that league that is sitting on the bench. I did play him last week, and it worked. He had an even better week this week, and that's Mr. Calvin Ridley. Julio, we said he would go off. He would. But, you get worried sometimes about Julio not seeing the end zone or not having the production because he's the number one. Calvin Ridley is a beast. And Matt Ryan looks for Julio a lot. I think Calvin Ridley is starting to earn looks from Matt Ryan, and he is a beast. I'm actually considering in my flex spot in that league not playing a running back and playing him in instead. He's been looking real good. What about you? Receivers, what do we like out there? What went well for you? And then maybe we'll talk about some guys that might be out there on the wire to keep your eye on.
Yeah, I mean, my starters, just to give you an idea, and I'll give you my perspective on it, it's Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, as well as Kenny Golladay. Kind of going in this week, my feeling is that Keenan Allen is probably going to be my lead receiver. I think that's going to be against Houston. It's going to go back and forth, and Keenan Allen continues to be Phillip Rivers' favorite target. I am concerned about Amari Cooper playing Miami. I feel like their passing game could disappear early in that game, especially if the defense scores points. That's always a kiss of death to receivers, is when defenses start scoring points. And I may consider Golladay, as I said. I think the way to attack Philadelphia is going to be through the air and deep, and that certainly favors Golladay in this matchup. I do have Marquise Brown sitting on my bench going against Kansas City. That's probably going to be my, if I make the move that I regret move, when I pull Amari Cooper out, because then watch Amari Cooper get 5 catches for 120 yards and a couple touchdowns. But
hey, look, man.
But those are kind of some of the decisions you got to make when you've got that flexibility, and you're starting to talk, because you're starting to understand how the flow of the game could potentially go, and that is and that's where you start being concerned. Like, if I was playing and if you had Lamar Jackson, you're probably against Miami in the first week. You're like, well, we know Miami's going to stink. We didn't know they were going to stink that bad. Lamar Jackson's not a bad play. But, man, how did that turn out? That was a phenomenal play if you played him. So, because now we know what Miami is.
And we know Kansas City's defense is their weak spot. And, here's the thing. Mark Andrews, tight end for Baltimore, has had close to, if not double-digit receptions both weeks.
Yep.
I know last week he went over 100. I think he did the first week, saw the end zone both weeks. Phenomenal.
Yep.
I think this is the guy that they expected when they brought him in. I think he's been there 2 years now. Maybe this is third. Maybe it's the second. Nonetheless, so you got the dual threat with Lamar Jackson potentially running the ball or passing the ball. Then you got a nice intermediate guy who can fly and is a beast as well in Mark Andrews. I mean it's something you'll have to think hard about, because I think that I don't think they're going to be able to double up. They're not going to double up a rookie in Marquise Brown. They're just not. Okay, I mean it's just their worry is going to be, stopping Lamar Jackson. And that's going to probably take some people out of the secondary to do so, or to mix him up, or to disguise some blitzes, or disguise some, faux blitzes, some stunts, So at the end of the day, it looks to me like you got single coverage with a guy that's one of the fastest people in football right now, and a guy that can throw the ball, maybe not super accurate, but accurate enough, can certainly get it out in front of him.
Yep.
Doesn't have any problem throwing it deep to him. It's a consideration you'll have to think about going into this week, because this is a heavyweight matchup, son.
Yeah, I could tell you, some people to look at if you're kind of getting down to that third receiver, maybe in a deeper league, that I think are going to outperform probably their expectations. One, for Chicago, I would say Allen Robinson. As bad as the Bears' passing attack has been so far, it's under a lot of scrutiny. They finally get against a defense, I think, that can be taken advantage of in Washington. If you watch the first game, I mean, Allen Robinson was the only one that really performed out there.
And Josh Norman hasn't been the same guy since he went to the Pro Bowl.
And Allen catches. One thing I will say about Allen is he may not be the field stretcher that you'd think of a number one receiver, but he catches everything in that comes to him.
And he can catch contested balls too, because he's so big.
And if you know Trubisky, he'll throw them. So sometimes ill-advised. So I think that's one guy that's kind of a little lower down that you could get you could get a wide receiver 2 production out of him this week. I'd feel 75% confident, if I'm kind of putting a percentage on it. Another guy I think to look at, and maybe he's still a stash player if he's in your league, depending upon how deep it is, but is DK Metcalf. What I like about him is he clearly has. He's got the attention of his quarterback, which is good because, usually with a rookie, that's a little tough. But more importantly, the way he's playing is really counter to what everybody predicted him to be. He's catching contested passes. He's catching intermediate routes. He's fighting for the ball. Those are some of the things that people thought, man, hey, this guy's a horse and he's fast as all get out. He's just going to run down the field constantly. And that's not who he's been. I could see that relationship evolving a little bit. So, and he's certainly down. You want to be careful. I would say, these are the kind of guys at this point, unless you're under some major injury concerns. Allen Robinson, to me, is a play this week, though I would say he's probably going to be a wide receiver 3 in most leagues, but I think could outproduce that role. DK Metcalf might not be getting on there. He might be a guy you stash and watch how it's going, because chemistry develops throughout the year, and that's one I could see. Really kind of growing a bit, and particularly this week playing New Orleans could get interesting. If they can put up some points. I mean, we're not expecting Drew Brees points, but they may have to throw the ball, enough that makes him very viable. Yep.
Emmanuel Sanders had a great week last week. They go to Green Bay to take on the Bears. I have him on my bench. I've had him every week on the bench. Starting to lean towards maybe getting him in there after the bang up. And they're going to have to throw the ball, so that could be a good play if you have him more than likely on your bench. Waiver wire pickups if they haven't been picked up this week already. Deebo Samuel, the whole experiment with Dante Pettis, he's not getting any targets. Deebo's getting the looks. Now, again, my concern there is the ball's been spread around a bit, and how consistent that may be, is yet to be seen, I think. But, he's put up some solid couple weeks. Another guy, Terry McLaurin, I was tinkering with picking him up. I think I did and dropped him for somebody. But he's a guy, he scored both weeks. He's obviously the lead receiver on the Redskins. Case Keenum, he's not great. But, look, man, when that whole thing went down, with the big contract for Cousins going to Minnesota. Well, Case Keenum was the quarterback there. And so Case Keenum was sent to Denver, and so now Case Keenum has been moved yet again to Washington, and he's actually, I mean, it's not great, but he's not bad, and he's able to get a guy like this who's a playmaker of the ball. So somebody to think about. Again, I talked about Curtis Samuel, and even in some of our leagues, because this is our 8-man league, Sterling Shepard's out there because he's been under concussion. Somebody to look at with Daniel Jones coming in. Okay, we Kansas City, Mecole Hardman had him, dropped him. He saw a touchdown this week. Robinson, another guy on that. He's been there. I think he saw the end zone. Both those guys.
Yeah.
If you have the room, roster them just because of the potent offense that they're in and Hill's out.
Sure. Another potential is DJ Chark from Jacksonville. He. If you look with Minshew, I mean, they threw the ball 33 times. He was the most targeted receiver with 9, and he caught the most amount of passes. He had 7 catches, only 55 yards. They struggled a bit to push it down the field, but he did get a score. So there are some guys out there that are potentially, and again, part of it is the quarterback changes that are developing some chemistry, whether they're young guys or whether they're guys with new quarterbacks that are going to have some potential maybe to grow as the season goes on. I like what Minshew did in this game. It wasn't flashy. It was obviously a close, low-scoring game, which was a little bit more indicative to a Jacksonville-type game as opposed to a Houston game, which is who they played. But he was definitely targeted. So those are some guys that you really, I think, could see. You could see some move from coming up as we go. I think we've hit a lot of the receivers. I think right now we'll probably kind of just wrap this up with a last segment, kind of talking a little bit about tight ends and talk about defenses too as well. And maybe just defenses more so on the matchup, or if anybody's kind of made us nervous. At this point. So let's talk about the tight ends though first.
Yeah, I think from a tight end perspective this week, the hot name was Mark Andrews, as we touched on earlier. If he was out there, he's gone today. Because everybody wants a piece of that with Lamar Jackson. He's performed 2 weeks in a row. 2 weeks in a row very well. I don't anticipate it slowing down, but it is tight end, so there will be weeks that they might be much less involved. And I don't expect his numbers to be as explosive as that, but he's definitely solid to have on your team.
Yep.
Vance McDonald saw the end zone twice with Mason Rudolph throwing in the ball. If he was dropped because he did nothing in week 1 and you need a tight end, I dropped him. I'm not going to go back out and get him, but it's not something that hasn't crossed my mind. Again, I think that he could be in actually better position with Rudolph back there. Who else we got out there? You got, the O.J. Howard experiment. His ADP was very high going into the season. A lot of people drafted him high and expected a really, really good year, like top 5 at the end of the year. Didn't have a good week 1, didn't have a good week 2. Cameron Brate's being more involved in the offense passing wise. And, if you have O.J. Howard, unless the wire's barren, I'd think about making a move. I'd even consider putting in Witten. He hasn't put up a lot of yards, but he scored both weeks, and I said it early in the cast. Like, if you get a touchdown out of your tight end every week, that's a solid day. Jimmy Graham, I still don't believe in that.
Talk about Delaney Walker.
Delaney Walker, man,
continues to put up points. Like he's probably a little safer, not quite the boomer bust. Because really, once you get past the first probably 5 tight ends, you are going to have stinkers, and that's part of developing your roster and getting that consistency.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't get Kelsey, then you don't have the rock star. So then behind that, you're going to really have Ertz and Kittle that are going to be.
Kittle had a great
guys.
week 1,
Yep.
so week 2, not afraid of it. It is a favorite target.
But I don't think they're not going to throw up 3 points on you. You start getting into beyond that a little bit more boomer bust, where Mark Andrews probably is, I think, certainly looks the part of elevating into that group that's going to get those catches.
Darren Waller
Yep.
from Oakland. I actually got rid of I don't know, it was our league or the other one, of O.J. Howard for him last week, and didn't have a super tough matchup against Kansas City, but did perform. Wasn't blow up, but he had a good day again. I mean, he seems to be a guy that Carr's throwing to, and he's making plays. You know, his ceiling isn't as high as your Ertz, Kittle, Kelsey. His floor is higher than a lot of these other guys out there, though.
Evan Ingram right now probably makes a lot of sense just given the situation. Concern with him is an injury risk. One guy who will continuously be on these lists, and really the fear is injury with him, is Greg Olsen. Greg Olsen is still a favorite target and still somehow manages to catch balls when he's healthy, get those 30-yard catches, the 24-yard catches, and get a few chunks, and he'll get targeted. The big problem with Greg Olsen is literally every time the guy catches the ball, he gets up with like wincing or limping or something.
I love the guy. I really hope that we see him in the booth because I think he's very well spoken to.
Yeah, it's somebody that could maybe have a good week this week, maybe kind of an outside shot, a little bit more of a flyer, I think, is Austin Hooper in Atlanta. Like I think the matchup there lends to an opportunity. Again, we're kind of getting past that first run of tight ends. You get really down below this point, and either you're hoping for somebody to get in the end zone or you're hoping them to catch a couple of crazy long passes that are not indicative of their offense. So
I had mentioned it earlier. I dumped Vance McDonald in one of my leagues for TJ Hawkinson, who had a great week one with Detroit, an awful week this past week. I'm not, wetting my pants yet over it. I think that he'll be fine. He's incredible. His size is incredible. Great hands, fast, and that's an offense that Stafford can throw the ball, and he's a seasoned veteran. So if you went out and picked up Hawkinson, unless there's something really good out there that you want to try, like I said, I tried to dump him for Mark Andrews. Someone else had waiver priority and got Andrews. I knew that was probably going to happen because I looked at the waiver priority list and I wasn't, at the top. So I was relegated to the fact that, if I don't get him, am I okay? And yeah, I'm okay. I think he'll be fine throughout the year. Again, you're playing, you said it, if you don't have those top three, you want to kind of stay in that second tier grouping if possible, and just really just try to ride it out with some of these guys, and unless it's based on a matchup that you really see is going to favor a tight end maybe out on the wire that you can grab, you want to ride the guys. Now I will say, as my strategy, if I don't have one of the top guys, I have Kittle in one league, and these other two I have Hawkinson and Waller. As we start to approach, the end of the year, if I'm still involved, I will start to play a little roulette and play tight ends on matchups if I have the ability to. But outside of the ones we mentioned, Jordan Reed, non-existent in Washington. Actually, Vernon Davis, believe it or not, is probably more worth a play if you needed to. Sure. That offense. You got the Eric Ebron, Jack Doyle situation in Indianapolis. I think Ebron scored this weekend. He had an unbelievable year last year, and I was fortunate enough to have him. Grabbed him early before it started going, just because it was Andrew Luck, and Doyle was hurt early last year. And it worked out throughout the rest of the season. I don't think you're going to see that. Certainly not that I think Brissett is awful. He's not Luck, and I just don't think you're going to see anywhere, he scratches the surface of what he did last year. Other guys, out there that you might see for the Rams, you got Everett and Higbee. I think that Everett is the more talented tight end overall, athletically, but he's just totally inconsistent, drops balls, and so that's why you see Tyler Higbee, the other tight end there, get a lot more work from Goff. But you got the Cameron Brate situation with O.J. Howard. Like I just said a minute ago, he's seeing the receptions and way more of them than Howard is, and I think that'll continue. So it's kind of a mishmash out there. The reality is there's a couple guys on the younger side that are new here that you might want to take on a chance on. Your Hawkinson, your Darren Waller, and you got the Mark Andrews, and that's fine. Other than that, you probably want to stay pat with the tight ends you got and ride it out, because I'm looking at the wire, and it's, again, if it's not, unless it's a matchup thing, it's not pretty. I mean, like, I see Ebron out there, but they have Atlanta this week, and Deion Jones last week was spying on whoever the running back was in the backfield and following them left and right. And I don't know if he'll do that this week with Marlon Mack, or they'll strap him to a guy like Ebron. But that kid's fast as the secondary guy, and that's going to cause problems for Ebron if they do. So I don't anticipate a huge game out of him.
And plus, they have a balance in their tight end with Jack Doyle too as well, which
right.
can be a challenge.
Right. So let's wrap it up with some defense talk. I started out the cast talking about the fact that I have Baltimore, and I traded them out for Dallas taking on Miami. I'm looking forward to that. Any other cool matchup situations or wire people?
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly going to see, I think, this week across the board, whether you're in a standard PPR, half PPR, which with defenses isn't as critical, that it's a Dallas, New England, and Chicago. I mean, Dallas certainly gets the Miami matchup, and they're a strong defense to begin with. You've got New England taking on the Jets, and the New England defense just gets stronger and stronger. Bears go up against Washington, which is not as strong of a team. You got, in your other consensus picks up there, up near the top, are going to be Minnesota taking on Oakland. Oakland kind of fell flat offensively last week, and Carr and whether he can be consistent. Probably the more interesting matchup, as you mentioned, Baltimore. Baltimore kind of falls out, but this is you're playing Kansas City. Like, Kansas City is going to knock all the best defenses down significantly this year.
I'm just concerned that I am making the wrong move, because, like you said, we could come out and then Baltimore ends up having a great day defensively. So
you could, but I mean, logic states that there is nothing like it's not like Dallas is a normally number 10 defense. I mean, Dallas is probably top 6 defense, and they're playing against a team that's absolutely a mess. Yeah, Baltimore could come out and play well. I mean, again, it was just like what I did with the Bears. I played a matchup of Cincinnati. I thought their defense was going to be strong against a Tennessee team that I thought was going to kind of be limping around this year. I found out that wasn't the case, and I sat a Bears team that lost and still put up a ton of points because they only gave up 10 points and they got a bunch of sacks. So, I mean, you got your
Tennessee might be out there. They got Jacksonville with Gardner Minshew, who's been fine, but they're a stout defense. I would anticipate that being a low-scoring game. So if maybe not so much from the sacks or turnover perspective, but in terms of a low-scoring game, so your defense doesn't have a lot of points put on them, maybe something there. But I mean, it's kind of. This is another thing, and I don't have problems playing roulette with your defense every week, unless you have one of the best defenses, and even then you could do it just based on the matchup. So, it's a hit or miss. I'm very high on playing defenses based on their matchup, which is why I did the thing with Dallas versus Miami.
Usually what I find with defenses is as a year goes on, I just figure out who I'm kind of down on that I expected to be stronger. And I will tell you, like a team like Houston, I'm really starting to get down on their defense, even though it was a closer game. I'm just concerned whether they got playmakers to get any of the extra points that you need, not just keeping the scoring down, but being able to create turnovers, get sacks. They're one that was considered to be a lot better coming into this year. Still really not uncomfortable with Cleveland because I just don't like what their offense does.
I love Myles Garrett, but man.
Yeah, and I think Pittsburgh is another defense that's probably fallen quite a bit. Not that I thought that they were going to be an elite defense, but I think now, given the situation offensively, there's going to be a lot of pressure on them, and so that could hurt them in a lot of matchups. So while those are usually... Houston and Pittsburgh certainly have been, the last few years, been mainstays. Those are probably the ones that I see kind of sliding down the rail a little bit as we go on. You got Philadelphia against Detroit, who might not be a bad matchup. I just don't like the fact that Philadelphia's weakness is their passing defense, and Detroit, if they play well, can sling it. So those are kind of things that I see. I think overall, again, you're back to, if you've got one of the top 4 or 5 defenses, you play them.
Yep.
And if you don't, then play a matchup. And, some of the matchups are a little dicey this week, so you're going to have to in some ways get lucky. But those are some teams out there that maybe can help you.
All right. Good enough. Longer than usual for fantasy, but good stuff nonetheless. We're going to cut everybody loose. We'll be back with some previews for NFL week 3 and college week 4 very soon. Have a great day.